A complaint against Bill Murray has halted production on the movie Being Mortal.
On the silver screen, they looked like the perfect team. Drew Barrymore, Cameron Diaz, Lucy Liu, and Bill Murray, a glamorous squad of angels and their quirky sidekick. To millions who watched Charlie's Angels in 2000, the chemistry seemed undeniable, almost effortless. Smiles flashed on red carpets, laughter-filled talk show couches, and glossy magazine spreads painted a picture of harmony. But beneath the carefully curated image, something else was brewing. Reports surfaced of a tense altercation between Murray and Liu, whispers of insults exchanged on set, and even rumors of a physical confrontation. Murray was said to have mocked Liu's acting ability, while Liu, far from silent, fired back in defense of her place among Hollywood's rising stars. The public only saw the movie's slick choreography and playful banter. Behind the cameras, though, cracks were already forming in the perfect team narrative. A bond that fans believed was authentic was, in truth, far more complicated, perhaps even hostile. Was this friendship ever real, or simply a Hollywood act designed to sell tickets? The answer lies in the story of how a billion-dollar franchise packaged camaraderie for the world, and what really happened when the cameras stopped rolling. When Columbia Pictures announced a new Charlie's Angels film in 1999, the studio knew it was taking a gamble. The television show of the late 1970s had been a campy hit, but audiences of the new millennium wanted more than feathered hair and car chases. To succeed, the reboot would need not only dazzling action sequences, but also a cast whose charisma could transcend the screen. That's where the carefully assembled quartet came in. Drew Barrymore, already a Hollywood veteran, and one of the film's producers. Cameron Diaz, fresh off the success of There's Something About Mary, 1998. Lucy Liu, who had just broken out on the Emmy-winning series Ally McBeal. And Bill Murray, the beloved comedian and star of classics like Ghostbusters, 1984, and Groundhog Day, 1993. On paper, it was a dream team, one that could deliver both box office numbers and endless PR opportunities. The machine revved into action immediately. Glossy spreads in magazines such as Vanity Fair showcased the sisterhood of Barrymore, Diaz, and Liu, always with Murray smiling at their side. Stylists coordinated outfits so the three angels looked like complementary pieces of a glamorous puzzle. Diaz in bright, playful colors, Barrymore in bohemian chic, Liu in sleek sophistication. Murray, meanwhile, was framed as the quirky uncle, not quite fitting in, but always there to crack a joke. The campaign's success was undeniable. By the time Charlie's Angels premiered in November 2000, the narrative had already been set. These weren't just co-stars, they were friends. Talk shows amplified the message. On The Tonight Show with Jay Leno, Cameron Diaz gushed about the amazing chemistry among the cast. Barrymore, speaking to Entertainment Weekly in October 2000, described the experience as a family affair. Even Liu, who was often typecast as the icy professional, spoke warmly about her co-stars and the supportive atmosphere on set. It was exactly what the studio needed. The film opened at #1 at the U.S. box office, earning $40 million in its first weekend and eventually grossing $264 million worldwide. Data anchor, Charlie's Angels box office, 2000. Hollywood had sold a narrative of teamwork and joy, and audiences bought it without question. Yet subtle details hinted at something more complicated. During the red carpet circuit, Murray often stood slightly apart from the trio. In group photos, his playful smirks sometimes contrasted with the glowing smiles of Barrymore, Diaz, and Liu. At one press conference in London, Murray was noticeably quiet as the women fielded most of the questions. Most viewers chalked it up to his dry, comedic style. But insiders whispered that the energy off-camera wasn't nearly as harmonious as the PR machine suggested. The packaging of camaraderie wasn't accidental. It was strategy. Hollywood knows that audiences don't just want to watch heroes on screen. They want to believe those heroes share bonds in real life. By marketing the Angels as inseparable sisters and their handler as an eccentric friend, Columbia Pictures created an illusion strong enough to boost not only ticket sales, but also merchandise, soundtracks, and eventually plans for sequels. Still, even the most polished image has seams. Liu's rising star power after Ally McBeal positioned her as more than just the third angel. Murray, an established legend, was accustomed to being the center of attention. Add Barrymore's clout as both producer and star, and suddenly the family dynamic became a delicate balance of egos, reputations, and career trajectories. For the public, however, none of this mattered. What they saw were radiant smiles, choreographed laughter, and a promise that these four really did enjoy each other's company. Every glossy cover, every talk show anecdote, every red carpet shot reinforced the same idea. Hollywood had given audiences not just a movie, but a ready-made friendship to believe in. Illusion hardened into truth. Behind the glossy smiles and choreographed camaraderie, small details began to chip away at the perfect team facade. For most viewers, these signs were invisible, buried under a flood of marketing images. But to those who followed Hollywood closely, the cracks started to appear almost immediately. The first major story came from the set itself. According to multiple reports from crew members, a heated confrontation erupted during filming in 2000. Bill Murray, frustrated with revisions to the script, allegedly turned to Lucy Liu and said, "You can't act." The words landed like a thunderclap. For a rising actress who had just earned a Screen Actors Guild Award nomination for Ally McBeal in 1999, data anchor, the remark wasn't just insulting, it was a dismissal of her entire career. Witnesses claimed Liu shot back with sharp words of her own, defending her professionalism and refusing to be undermined. The dispute reportedly escalated to shouting, and rumors swirled that it nearly became physical. Publicists moved quickly to smooth over the story. Press releases emphasized the fun on set, while interviews steered clear of any mention of tension. Yet insiders leaked whispers to outlets like the Los Angeles Times and Entertainment Weekly, 2000-2001, planting the seed that not everything was as harmonious as advertised. Money and power only magnified the fissures. Drew Barrymore, as both producer and lead, had significant control over the film's creative direction. Cameron Diaz, by then commanding a reported $12 million salary. Data anchor, Diaz's pay reported in 2000, was the box office darling. Lucy Liu, though immensely popular after Ally McBeal, was still treated as the third angel. Bill Murray, a comedy legend, seemed unwilling to defer to younger stars, especially one whose Hollywood resume was still in its early chapters. Hierarchies were unspoken but deeply felt. Patterns of absence further fueled speculation. When the Angels toured for international premieres, Murray's appearances were inconsistent. In Tokyo, photographs captured only the three women smiling. For photographers. In London, Murray skipped a cast dinner entirely. At the MTV Movie Awards in 2001, Barrymore, Diaz, and Liu appeared on stage together to accept Best Dance Sequence, but Murray was nowhere to be found. For fans, these gaps were barely noticeable. For the press, they hinted at growing distance. The time promotion for Charlie's Angels. Full Throttle began in 2003. The absence became impossible to ignore. Bernie Mac, not Bill Murray, was cast as Bosley. Official statements framed it as a scheduling change, but insiders knew better. Entertainment outlets like The Guardian and Variety reported that Murray's falling out with Liu had made a sequel reunion untenable. The studio's solution was simple: recast the role and pretend nothing was wrong. Social dynamics in the early 2000s were different from today's instant social media commentary. Without Twitter or Instagram, silence was easier to maintain. Yet silence itself became a signal. While Barrymore and Diaz often praised each other publicly, Liu rarely mentioned Murray in interviews. When asked about him during a 2002 promotional event for Ballistic, X vs. Sever, she dodged the question with a polite smile and quick pivot to another topic. It was diplomacy, but it also spoke volumes. Even the work styles clashed. Murray, known for his improvisational genius, thrived on spontaneity. Liu, trained in a more disciplined approach, relied on preparation and structure. What might have been complementary instead bred tension, especially under the grueling conditions of long shoot days and global press tours. As one crew member told Entertainment Weekly years later, they were oil and water, both brilliant in their own way, but impossible together. By 2003, the narrative of conflict was too strong to contain. The absence of Murray in Full Throttle became the loudest statement of all. He had been erased from the franchise he helped launch, while Lucy Liu's star continued to rise, leading to a pivotal role in Quentin Tarantino's Kill Bill, Volume 1, 2003. For those who had doubted the rumors, the casting change confirmed everything. Cracks were no longer rumors. For years, the alleged feud between Lucy Liu and Bill Murray lived in the shadowy corners of Hollywood gossip. Fans whispered about an on-set altercation. Journalists hinted at tension, but rarely had direct confirmation. Then, slowly, the veil began to lift. In 2009, nearly a decade after the first Charlie's Angels film, Lucy Liu finally addressed the rumors in a candid interview with the New York Times. She didn't name Murray outright, but her words painted a vivid picture. When someone speaks to you in a condescending way, you have to stand up for yourself. And I did. Data anchor, The New York Times, 2009. It was the first time Liu publicly acknowledged the clash, confirming what had long been whispered behind closed doors. Bill Murray, for his part, offered his own version of events. In a 2015 promotional interview for the indie drama Heaven Knows What, he claimed he had criticized the script, not Liu. "I never attacked her. I said the lines we had were unworkable, but somehow it became a personal thing." Data anchor, Murray's 2015 interview. His denial sounded measured, but for many it rang hollow. Why, then, had he never returned for the sequel? Why had Bernie Mac quietly replaced him as Bosley in 2003? Media outlets seized on the conflicting accounts. The Guardian ran headlines like, "Lucy Liu confirms Charlie's Angels feud with Bill Murray," 2015. Entertainment blogs resurrected the story whenever Murray appeared in the news, framing it as a classic Hollywood "he said, she said." The incident also ignited discussions far beyond the personal feud. Commentators pointed out how the narrative reflected broader dynamics in Hollywood. Lucy Liu, one of the few Asian American actresses headlining a major studio film in 2000, had fought hard for legitimacy in an industry rife with typecasting. Bill Murray, a comedy veteran with decades of acclaim, represented the old guard. To critics, his alleged words, "You can't act," carried not just personal sting, but also undertones of gender and racial bias. Fans split into factions. Some rallied behind Murray, insisting his offbeat humor had been misunderstood. Others sided firmly with Liu, seeing her defiance as a rare example of a woman of color, standing her ground in a male-dominated industry. Social media, which had matured by the mid-2010s, amplified the divide. Hashtags like Cha Team Lucy and Chow Justice for Liu trended intermittently whenever the feud resurfaced in entertainment news cycles. By then, the story had transcended gossip. It had become part of the cultural memory of the franchise. In 2019, when Sony Pictures released another reboot of Charlie's Angels directed by Elizabeth Banks, old wounds resurfaced. Articles revisited the original feud as a reminder of the franchise's messy history. Variety described it as the most infamous on-set clash in Angels lore. Data anchor, Variety, 2019. Even in a new era, the shadow of Liu vs. Murray lingered. The scandal also reshaped how both stars were perceived. For Lucy Liu, it reinforced an image of resilience. She had not only survived the confrontation, but gone on to critical success in Kill Bill Vol. 1, 2003, and later the CBS series Elementary, 2012-2019. For Bill Murray, the feud became one of several anecdotes in a career marked by brilliance, but also by reports of volatility. Stories circulated of clashes with directors like Richard Donner on Scrooged, 1988, and Harold Ramis during Groundhog Day, 1993. The Angels feud was no longer an isolated incident. It was part of a pattern. In the end, the scandal revealed more than just a clash of egos. It exposed how Hollywood sells camaraderie on posters while burying discord behind closed doors. It showed how a single moment on set could ripple across decades, shaping reputations and fueling debates about respect, power, and representation. The mask shattered in public. The fallout from the feud was not immediate, but it was unmistakable. When Charlie's Angels Full Throttle hit theaters in June 2003, audiences quickly noticed the absence of Bill Murray. Bernie Mac, another beloved comedian, had stepped into the role of Bosley. Official press statements framed the casting change as fresh energy for the sequel. But insiders knew the truth. Murray's return was simply untenable after the breakdown with Lucy Liu. Data anchor, Charlie's Angels, Full Throttle release, 2003. For the franchise, the consequences were mixed. On one hand, the sequel still performed respectably at the box office, grossing $259 million worldwide, just shy of the original's $264 million. Data anchor, box office comparison, $2,000 versus 2003. On the other hand, critics pointed to uneven chemistry and a more chaotic tone. The recasting of Bosley became a talking point, raising questions about what had really happened behind the scenes. The studio avoided the issue, leaving a conspicuous silence in place of explanation. For Lucy Liu, however, the fallout became a crucible. Instead of retreating, she emerged stronger. Quentin Tarantino cast her as O-Ren Ishii in Kill Bill Vol. 1, 2003, a role that showcased her range and elevated her into cinematic legend. By 2012, she was anchoring the CBS hit Elementary as Joan Watson, a groundbreaking gender-flipped role that ran for 7 seasons. Data anchor, Elementary premiere, 2012. Far from being diminished, her career trajectory suggested resilience and reinvention. Murray's path was more complicated. Though still celebrated for his iconic comedic legacy, his reputation increasingly carried the shadow of volatility. The feud with Liu became one story among several, from reports of clashes with Richard Donner on Scrooged, 1988, to the notorious falling out with Harold Ramis during Groundhog Day, 1993. By the 2010s, multiple co-stars, including Gina Davis and Seth Green, shared anecdotes of Murray's difficult behavior. Each time the Lucy Liu incident resurfaced as part of a broader pattern. Cultural critics also dissected the feud as emblematic of Hollywood's deeper dynamics. Essays in outlets like The Atlantic and Vulture argued that Liu's confrontation with Murray revealed both gender and racial bias in an industry that often marginalized women of color. The fact that she stood her ground, they noted, turned a private clash into a symbolic act of defiance. One 2018 retrospective described Liu as a pioneer of grace under fire, refusing to be diminished by the weight of a white male star's condescension. Data anchor, 2018 retrospective commentary. Meanwhile, the franchise itself became a case study in Hollywood spin. The 2019 reboot of Charlie's Angels, directed by Elizabeth Banks, tried to reframe the legacy around female empowerment. But box office numbers told a different story. The film grossed only $73 million worldwide against a $55 million budget. A commercial disappointment. Data anchor, 2019 reboot box office. Critics noted that audiences no longer bought into the glossy illusion of perfect teams, especially when the memory of past fractures was never far away. Public reactions to the feud evolved over time. In the early 2000s, silence prevailed. By the 2010s, with Liu and Murray offering competing narratives, fans debated openly online. Some sympathized with Murray, arguing his humor had been misinterpreted. Others saw Liu's story as a moment of empowerment, a woman refusing to accept disrespect in a notoriously difficult industry. The polarization itself became part of the feud's legacy, mirroring broader cultural debates about authority, power, and respect. In the end, the absence of Murray became more telling than his presence. His disappearance from the sequel, his silence at promotional events, and the studio's refusal to acknowledge the conflict all underscored what had been broken. What was marketed as harmony was, in reality, a fragile construct. And when one piece fell away, the gap spoke louder than any official statement could. The absence became a character. The feud between Lucy Liu and Bill Murray did more than fracture a single film set. Over time, it became a lens through which audiences could examine the way Hollywood packages relationships. Studios don't just sell movies. They sell intimacy, trust, and the illusion of camaraderie. The 2000 Charlie's Angels campaign proved how powerfully that illusion could work. But when the cracks appeared, the cost was equally clear. For fans of the original film, the revelation was sobering. Many had bought into the glossy image of four stars who laughed and bonded like family. When the truth emerged, that trust was shaken. If this friendship was manufactured, what other Hollywood besties were simply PR constructs? The question lingered well beyond the franchise itself. Cultural analysts pointed out that the feud revealed not only personal conflict, but also systemic fault lines. Lucy Liu's refusal to accept Murray's alleged condescension became a touchstone in discussions about respect and representation. At a time when Asian American actresses were still rare in leading roles, her resilience sent a message. Talent and dignity were non-negotiable. That act of defiance would later be seen as a precursor to broader reckonings in Hollywood, including the Not Me Too and Our Time's Up movements that erupted in 2017. Data anchor, Me Too, 2017. Meanwhile, Murray's reputation as a comedic genius remained intact, but it was tempered by stories of volatility. In retrospect, the feud with Liu became one example in a long line of conflicts that reshaped how audiences viewed his off-screen persona. He was still beloved, but he was no longer untouchable. The legacy also lived on in the franchise itself. The 2019 reboot, directed by Elizabeth Banks, leaned heavily into themes of empowerment and sisterhood. Yet box office disappointment suggested audiences had grown skeptical of Hollywood's packaging. Critics compared the reboot's failure to earlier illusions, noting that viewers were now more media literate, more willing to look past the red carpet smiles and ask what was really happening behind the scenes. Data anchor, Charlie's Angels reboot box office, 2019. Other Hollywood conflicts have since been measured against Liu and Murray's clash. From Vin Diesel versus Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson on the Fast and Furious set, to Sarah Jessica Parker versus Kim Cattrall on Sex and the City, the Angels feud remains a reference point. It was one of the first modern Hollywood rifts to be both whispered in gossip columns and later confirmed by the stars themselves, bridging the gap between rumor and reality. Perhaps the most enduring legacy lies in how the story reframed audiences' relationship with celebrity friendships. Viewers became savvier, learning to question the narratives fed to them by glossy magazines and studio PR. What once looked like unbreakable bonds could now be seen as contracts, negotiations, or carefully orchestrated marketing. The Liu-Murray conflict taught audiences not to mistake professional proximity for personal closeness. And yet, despite the fractures, fans still cherish the original Charlie's Angels film. They celebrate the campy action, the chemistry between the three women, and the cultural impact of seeing diverse female leads take center stage in a blockbuster. The work endures, even if the friendships behind it do not. That paradox, loving the art while questioning the illusion, is the true legacy of this feud. So what does it mean for us, the audience, when Hollywood friendships turn out to be carefully scripted performances? Can we ever truly believe in the authenticity of celebrity bonds, or are we always being sold a polished fantasy? The story of Lucy Liu and Bill Murray reminds us that even the brightest Hollywood smiles can hide fractures just out of view. For years, fans believed in the glossy narrative of unity, only to discover that behind the cameras, the bonds were fragile at best. So we turn the question to you. Do you believe this was ever a genuine friendship, or just a studio-crafted illusion to sell tickets? Was Murray unfairly painted as the villain, or was Liu's defiance the real turning point? Share your thoughts in the comments, and let's keep the conversation respectful. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Secrets Behind the Fame, and hit the notification bell so you never miss another untold Hollywood story. Because sometimes the fiercest battles in Hollywood aren't fought on screen. They erupt when the cameras stop rolling.